Hi, my name's Alvin. I'm the Youth Ministries Associate at CBOQ Youth. In the last few months, a lot more youth are participating in online gaming. And esports is really the competitive arm of online gaming. And so more and more youth are living, breathing in the digital realm. And so what does it mean for youth ministries to now step in there and walk alongside them, especially in faith formation? I'm glad in this presentation to have Bret Chapman and Jamie Harris join us today. They're going to talk through what are some of the challenges and both what are some of the opportunities that they've experienced and their experience in esports. And so love to welcome Brad this time.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Bret Chapman, and I'm here to talk about this emergent digital landscape that we find ourselves in the midst of. Thank you, Alvin, so much for helping me put this idea together and having the opportunity just to kind of share with what I'm seeing happen. So a little bit of history for myself. I've been in youth ministry specifically for about 25 years, with about 29 years in total youth and family ministry. About a year ago, I made the shift from full-time pastoral ministry into full-time coaching and player development in esports. And so Alvin and I got talking about, what does esports and this digital landscape look like? What could it possibly mean for youth ministry? I had a really good friend of mine down in Salem, Oregon, and he was willing to give me some time and just share his experience and kind of how he got involved in youth ministry, and the steps that led him there was specifically through video games and esports. And so I thought I'd just invite him in and have you hear his story, get a little bit of idea of what we're talking about. And at the end of this video, I'm going to come back and we're going to put it out to you guys. We want questions. What are you managing? What are you working through within your unique communities when it comes to this emergent landscape? The idea of being a digital missionary for our high school kids. How can I go and minister to my friends that are in this space? What can we do as ministry partners to see the gospel furthered and see evangelism take root in this new space? Personally, I love esports, both high level, amateur, even casual gaming as a great entry point. So let me pray really quick. Heavenly Father, I thank you so much for each and every person that's watching this video, whether they're a volunteer, part-time, or in full-time ministry, Lord, that you have put the passion upon their heart to reach out to this generation. I am so privileged just to be here and have this opportunity. And so I thank you, Lord God, that you are going to do something wonderful in all of our ministries. We just thank you and praise you right now in Jesus' name. Amen. I'll see you in a few minutes. Well, happy Tuesday, everyone. Here we go. I'd like to introduce you to Jamie Harris. And I'd like just to take this opportunity to just talk about this whole brand new idea of digital landscape, this digital mission field that stands before us. And I met Jamie several months ago, and we just been chit-chatting and hanging out and playing video games together, of all things. And I realized that his ministry path was so unique to anything that I had ever experienced. Now, I've been in ministry, as you already heard, for like 30 years now. And I've seen some pretty weird things. And Jamie's, I think you're going to really appreciate. So welcome, Jamie. Welcome to the call.
Thanks, Brett. Appreciate it, man. It's good to be here.
Yeah. Well, we're in this dynamic space. And I'd like to hear a little bit of kind of your story and what brings you to the space that you've chosen to inhabit when it comes to esports and youth ministry and this whole digital landscape.
Yeah, I think if I was to describe what brought me into gaming ministry, you know, this world of digital ministry and such, would really be two primary things. I can get into both of them if you like, but the first would be an experience I had as a young person that just opened my eyes to this world needs Jesus. And two would be my experience, my early experiences in like traditional church ministry, just getting exposed to youth ministry, I think pretty early on, and then learning, I think, how I most connect with youth. And that's through things I love, like like video games, right? So if you want, I could share both of those, a lot of those details. You know me, Brett, I can ramble. So you'll have to be my ramble radar, all right?
Well, yeah, and I'll definitely keep the ramble radar on for sure. But
Cool.
let's really start to connect the dots, because I
Cool.
think that, you know, youth leaders today, whether you're been to Bible college and you're getting paid to do this full time or part time, or you're just somebody that just is passionate about this emergent generation, and you're doing it for free out of your living room.
Yeah.
Like there is something unique about the opportunity to show kids about being a disciple and
Amen.
what does it mean to live out a life. But COVID has changed things dramatically when it comes to this whole presentation of ministry. Not the
Right.
gospel. The gospel is true and it will always be true, but our approach, I think, has had to change. But I think God prepared you long before COVID ever happened.
Yeah.
And why don't you
Yeah.
just tell a little bit of that story, just kind of how you all of a
For
sudden
sure.
kind of found ministry in digital landscapes.
Yeah, it started for me when I was a younger person. Let's see, going all the way through like what we call preschool, elementary school, like grade like 0 to about like 8th or 9th grade, maybe even 10th grade. I was going to Christian schools, some what we call public schools, you know, and then you have the private schools, which are, you know, you learn the Bible, you learn that. Then a public school is you just take regular, you know, government classes and such. And I transitioned to a public school, my 10th grade year. We call it sophomore over here. And so I was a sophomore, 10th grade. And my very first day in public school, very first day, right next to my locker, I saw a fight, like an all on like two girls fighting, slamming heads into lockers. And I just wanted to get my books out of my locker. People are like, get out of the way, watch the fight. I'm like, dude, I'm just trying to get to class. Like, this is terrifying. I feel like I was in like some action movie. And I remember walking away from that, everyone freaking out like, yeah, this is awesome. And I'm just like, there's a part of me that was like, okay, this is really cool. But it's horrible because I was like, the fact that this is cool just tells me like our world is so broken. And I immediately had this desire to just figure out how I could just be the love of Jesus to my peers. And I had an opportunity to do that shortly after because the popular kids in school, what we called the jocks, you know, it was the football players, the athletes. They invited me to a Halo party they were going to have. Now I'm 32. This would have been 2005, 2006. Halo party just meant we all get together, we play Halo. And you could LAN, you could Ethernet, you wire them up. You know, you have 4 people on an Xbox, you get 16 players for a full lobby, and you just play Slayer. And so you just go for eliminations and see who gets the most points, and you get bragging rights. And I wanted to go because I really liked Halo. They heard I was good. I was like the new Christian kid in town that was good at video games, and they wanted to kind of test me at that, see how good I really was. And I didn't want to go because I knew that there would be booze. I knew there was going to be weed. I knew there was going to be drugs. And I'm like, I don't know what to do. Talk to my parents. And they said, you know, we think that you've been raised like well enough to make your own decisions. However, like don't screw up while you're there, but you can go. If it's happening around you, space yourself from it. And if you can't get away from it, we're going to ask that you come home. So I show up to that Halo party. Sure enough, I kicked their butts. I remember the weapon I had. I remember where I was on the map. I remember what map we were on my first game. It was awesome. And these guys, because I was good at video games, they immediately liked me. Of course, started offering me weed and booze. And by the grace of God and thanks to good parenting, I didn't accept it. I said no to it. I was able to kind of like, you know, tell them like, hey, I'm not comfortable with it. They did it outside, space myself from it. And as it turns out, I had a great time. Showed up back at home around probably 2 or 3 in the morning. Mom comes downstairs, hears me walk in, and she smells weed. She smells booze. She's like, are you high? And I'm like sad. And I'm like, no, I'm not high. I'm just sad. Why are you sad? Did you not have fun? I was like, I'll just talk to you about it in the morning. So in the morning, I tell my parents, like, I'm sad because like, I want to be a light in this world, but like, I'm a human and I don't want to succumb to my flesh. I don't want to I don't want to be so overwhelmed by temptation that I say yes to the weed. I say yes to the booze, to the drugs, but I want to be around these people. What do? I don't want to go to these parties, but I want to play Halo with these guys. I want to influence them before they influence me. So my parents said, why don't you start having Halo parties here at our house? And they said, no booze. We don't want anybody, making out in our bathroom. And if they're going to smoke, they got to go across the street off of our property. But we'll buy half the snacks. You guys buy half the snacks. Me and my buddy, he lived in our house with us at the time. This would have been our 11th and 12th grade years now. And so we said, okay, every major holiday from there on, every major party holiday. So in the States, that's New Year's Eve, St. Patrick's Day, 4th of July, these things that get students together just for a reason to get drunk. Instead of drinking, they're playing Halo. And my little brother, who was like 7 at the time, was playing with us. My dad, who was, hitting 40 at the time, was playing with us. So here we were, just this group of dudes, and even some girls, like filling up my parents' house, 16 Xboxes and TVs and 4 players on each screen, tons of people. And my mom, not being able to sleep all night because we're yelling at our TVs, and my dad joining us. My mom smacking my dad, what are you doing? It's 5 a.m. Go to bed. And he's like, but I'm winning. And that was, holy cow, that was half my life ago. That was 16 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
The name Satellite Gaming, our ministry, the organization I represent, wasn't even thought of at that time. But that's really where it started. That's where this desire to be the love of Jesus in this ministry, in this culture, really started for me. And I'm grateful for my parents. I'm grateful for that. We were a family that liked video games and Taco Bell, and I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for that.
Oh, that's so cool. I love the idea of having that supportive structure. I mean, not all kids have that, but I found like in my path, in my journey in ministry, like sometimes as that youth worker, as that youth pastor, I was the most significant person in a kid's life.
Yeah.
And they really honored that role. Tell me about kind of like, so you have this passion, this love for people, your peers really at the time.
Yeah.
And so then did you go to Bible college then?
Yeah. Good question. I was encouraged by my mentor growing up he called it tithing your first year of adulthood. We don't need to get into the definitions of words and stuff, but that's, for layman's terms, he called it that. And what he meant was, if you don't know what to do when you become an adult, when you leave high school, give your first year of your adult life to God by going to Bible college. And I was like, well, I love ministry. I led a Bible study during lunch once a week at our school. I love that idea. I played music at the time, led some worship at church. So I was like, I'll go to school for worship arts, for worship ministry. So I went to Boise Bible College in Boise, Idaho. I actually loved it, made some lifelong friends there. And I fell in love with worship ministry. But through that, I got invited to start playing music at high school camps. And some of them went really well. Some of them didn't go so well because I was still learning. I was with a lot of young people serving in ministry. When you start ministry, and even now, here I've been doing it for 16 years, it just doesn't go logistically. It doesn't go well sometimes. My first few experiences were horrible. I was not prepared that people around me were learning. And eventually I went to a camp. They invited me back and they said, let's try that again. Let's try that again. They invited me back. It's probably because I didn't charge a fee because I was that bad. But something happened that summer and I fell in love with the camp. I fell in love with the youth leaders. I fell in love with the students. I made new friends, new mentors, lifelong friends, lifelong mentors. I ended up leading worship at that camp for 4 or 5 years in a row. And man, I tell you what, that to me, it went from, okay, I'm going to go to camp so I can do worship ministry, to like year after year, it became more, I was going to camp to do youth ministry, and I just so happened to be leading worship while I was there. So that kind of shifted to where I'm like, so I guess the first story was how the gaming stuff started. The second story is really where it started becoming youth work for me, right? I love doing ministry for more than just that demographic of youth, but that's what our ministry, our organization specializes in. So youth work it is. I love it.
And so then, so you did traditional youth ministry prior to what satellite gaming has become today?
Yeah, if it's cool, I'll actually tell you this kind of the beginning of that story, the kind of the transition from when I was a youth pastor into satellite gaming. Does that work for you? Yeah. So
yeah, I think that's probably a great place to start. I think for many of the people that are watching this now, I think our stories are really aligning, because we're talking about the passions of what brought us to where we are today.
Right. I didn't start this like, I like video games. I'm going to make ministry doing it. It's like, I use, the famous verse, God will give you desires of your heart. When I read that as a kid, I was like, I desire pizza. And I expected that a pizza would show up on my front doorstep. Like,
Okay.
no, that's not exactly how, but that's how I thought it worked when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Later on as an adult, I realized God's going to plant in my heart a desire, and he's going to use that desire to further his kingdom. Right. And to me, the desire that he gave me, the desire that he planted in my heart, was a desire to play video games and to use video games as a ministry. So how that all happened and how I saw that kind of come true was for most of my young adult life, I was working a traditional vocation like in sales or banking. I worked at a goat farm scooping goat poop for a while. That's a whole nother story. But I was
those are the best youth pastor stories of all time.
Oh, my prayer! I was interning at a church it was a pretty big church to what I was used to. It was a few hundred kids in the youth ministry, and I remember saying, like, in order to continue doing this internship, I need to make some money. I literally said, God, I will scoop poop if I have to for a living. Literally, someone laughed and they said, my aunt runs a goat farm if you're serious. And I was like, I guess so. So I did that. And that said, though, it was most of my ministry days in my young adult life was working traditional vocations while doing either volunteer or part-time ministry.
Okay.
And I was in Idaho. It's my hometown. There's a big chunk of my testimony, my personal story that happened in my young adult life, made some mistakes, and God took care of me through those and showed me grace, and still does today. But I ended up back at my hometown in Emmett, Idaho, where I had all those Halo parties. Like I still had friends that we still played games together. And, this was probably 6 years later. And here I am as a young adult now in this same town. My dad was a pastor. I was the youth pastor at his church while I was working a couple different jobs, eventually landed it in banking. And I met my now wife through Facebook. We had been acquainted through ministry before, and I was doing youth ministry, and it was going great. We were playing board games together, video games. We were going to their football games. Like, we were just building relationship. We had growth numerically. We had growth in our relationships with each other and in our relationships with God, which in my mind, that's the most important form of growth, are your kids growing closer to God. And I remember thinking, I'm never leaving this church. Like, I will be the pastor of this church someday. I'm never leaving. And then the Holy Spirit hits me with a brick truck. And I get a call from my wife's pastor from Kaiser, Oregon. And he says, we want to offer you a job as a full-time youth pastor. And I had been offered jobs doing youth ministry other places. They knew that I was interested in, some gaming, that I had done some unique ways of doing ministry. And, but this job, I said no, to jobs from connections I made at Bible college and such. And when I got this call, I was like, I have to do this. So I talked to my fiance at the time, and I said, Jess, like, I think I want to do this. She's like, you want to move back to Oregon? I just moved to Idaho. You want to move back to Oregon? I was like, yeah, is that okay? And she's like, yes, that's my hometown. Like, that's where my family is. Like, I'll go with you wherever you want. But if you're asking me if we can go back to my hometown, she's like, absolutely. So we do. I remember driving to my first full-time youth ministry job. I'm looking back at a little sign I have, that little plexiglass like square thing. It's 2015. That was 6 years ago in March 1st, 2015. I was driving to Kaiser, driving to Oregon, 8-hour drive. And I remember praying, God, I will be whatever these students need me to be when it comes to a youth pastor. If they play football, I will be a chaplain on the football team. If they play basketball, I will be like a volunteer referee, or maybe make $20 a game. I want to be around them. If they crochet, I'll start a crochet club. But please, God, don't let them be car mechanics. I hate working on cars. But I was like, I'll do it if I had to. I show up. The first conversation I witness is a conversation about Star Wars, which Star Wars movie is the best. And they're wearing Halo 2 shirts. And I'm like, my people, these are my people. So for me, I will say it was a very natural transition to start doing gaming ministry. Eventually from there, I'll make this part simple, and I'll just say, we wanted to do events where the entire community could come together regardless of what they believed or how they felt. We wanted our church, our location, our space to be a place where people just felt love. So we said, hey, we're inviting the community to a gaming night. And our youth ministry was called Satellite. So we had the first ever satellite gaming night. And our youth group, again, began to grow in several different ways. And people just started showing up because they wanted to play video games. We, of course, ended up sharing the gospel with those kids and came to know Christ. But that really is the transition from youth ministry to specifically gaming ministry. It was just simple. There are a lot of kids that play video games, and I want to create a safe place for them to do so.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where we start getting into like the weeds, right? But that's that transition of, okay, what about from youth pastor to specifically gaming? I still consider myself a youth pastor, right? Like I still consider myself a youth leader, youth director, whatever you want to call it. But that's where the gaming part, I think, really came from. Like, okay, when I was 16, it was just playing games. When I was 25, it was like, let's do this. Let's make it happen.
Yeah. That's cool. I can remember I've had a very eclectic approach to ministry. I've been in some really strange and weird places, and I find myself in this one place with a church that it didn't reflect the church that I had grown up in that the senior pastor loved Rick Warren.
Okay.
From Saddleback Community Church.
Yeah.
And so he wore sandals, shorts, and Hawaiian shirts year round every Sunday that he preached. And I think he did it on purpose to just really be disruptive to the identity that this mainline conservative Christian church had always been. And he just wanted them to see that there was more than just the four walls of their church. And that this building in this city could be so much more.
Right.
And I can remember sitting in his office, and we're talking about youth ministry, and we're talking about what we're going to do. And he says, well, every Friday night I have these kids. I have this one kid from our church, and he just brings his Wii, and they play video games on Friday night. And there's like 6 of them that just come out religiously and play with him. Would you just be their pastor? Would you just come out and show up? And I'm like,
so cool.
I can't play Wii. You see these thumbs? Like I can't reach the X button and the other button. Like, it's terrible. My thumbs are too short. And so the Wii worked out. But I watched as I invested in these kids and I prayed with these 6 kids. I watched over the course of about 8 months, these 6 kids start inviting their friends to an evening where there was no judgment, there was no nothing, and they just showed up. And all of a sudden we had 80 kids in the room, and they were rotating through the playlist because all they played was Rock Band. That's all awesome. They played.
That's
awesome. And yeah, like, so this is like 2009, 2010. And I'm like, wow, I'm in this space.
Yeah.
And I guess, as I kind of know what's coming next in our storyline, you're involved in the church. You're wanting to see something happen that's different.
Yeah.
And so satellite gaming becomes what? Like, where does it start in relation to the church, in the school system, and kind of what did you do?
I love that. So what happens is we're satellite youth ministry. We're calling this satellite gaming. The school district, actually our public school district, was actually really comfortable with us promoting these events. We kind of had 2 approaches to events in youth ministry, and we still do follow this model today. And it was, we have community events. Community events are events that we promote everywhere. The public school system lets us promote it in school. We show up at lunches, we hand out flyers. What we're saying when we're hosting a community event is, yes, it is a church hosting this. Yes, we are a Christian organization, but you're not coming to an event where there will be like a platform of verbal proselytization, right? We're not giving a verbal gospel message. Now, we are showing them love. We're demonstrating the love of Jesus. We are making sure that they experience something different in this place. Now, I also agree that those weren't the only events we were having, right? So what would happen, they would come to these community events. They'd start following us on Instagram, following us on social media. Their parents would get to know us. And then on our social media, we'd host internal or private events where we would share the gospel. So now we'd say, hey, we're going to have these private events like a youth all nighter, or like a Christmas party or a Thanksgiving party, where we are going to pray. We are going to talk about the gospel. And now that we have this relationship with them, we can kind of say like, hey, you want to come to a church thing? You know, and they're like, sure. Yeah. I mean, there's gonna be video games there, right? I'm like, yeah, of course. So what happens with satellite gaming is this: we're, again, satellite youth ministry. At our community events, we realized there were parents coming, but they didn't really know a whole lot about gaming, right? They some did, but a lot of them were just like, my students entering this tournament. What is this? A Smash Bros tournament? So one of my buddies, Dylan, actually, who you've gotten the pleasure of meeting, he decided, hey, we should start doing some educational stuff at these events. So at our community events, we said where students compete and parents learn. So students would compete in tournaments while in another room in the same building at the same event during the same time. Parents would receive education on various social aspects of gaming culture, and community members would come. And like people just around town that worked at like YMCA, the Rec, you know, places like that, they would come in and they would hear about just what we do and why we think education around these topics is important for adults. And to give you an idea, our youth ministry, when we first started, was around 15 kids. But at these community events, we got 40 people at our first one, then 125, 175, then 250. We eventually got up to 500 people. Well, we started with a youth ministry of 15. Now, our youth ministry, as much as I want to say like, yeah, we grew to 500, I'm not really interested in numbers that intensely. Like, numbers are people, right? So their numbers are important. But our youth ministry attendance eventually grew to about 45. That was like our regular weekly, like gospel-centered functions, which is awesome. But these community events, like everyone wanted to know more about what we're doing. And to give you an idea, I was going through the book of Ezra when this all started. And the book of Ezra, you have King Darius, King Artaxerxes, like they're basically telling Israel, because Israel's trying to rebuild the temple, right? They're trying to do a work with the public eye on them. And the public eye, through King Darius and Artaxerxes, they're like, you can't do that. You can't build a temple. We'll kill you if you try to build it. And Israel like prays, and they're like, okay, well, we're going to do it anyway. But by the end of Ezra, as I'm reading through it, I'm like, God, like, what do you want me to learn about ministry while I'm reading this? By the time I get to the end of the book of Ezra, you see these two kings. They start funding the building of the temple. They start sending resources. They say, I'll buy the wood. I'll buy the hammers. I'll buy the nails. Like, hey, you know what? As a matter of fact, if people don't help you, we're going to kill them. And, Israel's kind of, well, we don't have to go that far, right? Like, the school district didn't go that far. But what happened was the school district came to us and they said, we love that you do parent education. We know you're a Christian organization. We have some grant money through the 21st Century Grant, where we can run after school clubs and after school programs. In order for us to keep that grant, we have to offer what we call parent nights or parent education nights. He said, would you be willing to host your events out of our building, our public school building? So we don't have to run parent nights anymore. We can consider this our parent night. So it makes us get more grant money, and we'll give you a portion of that grant money. I'm like, yes. So we start running after school clubs, after school programs. Before COVID, we were in about 13 different schools running programs after school. Like, kids go to soccer, kids go to football. Kids would go into the cafeteria. We'd set up Xboxes and TVs in like 13 different schools a week. Volunteers going everywhere. We had these black and yellow totes that they'd wheel in. Students would be like, it's a satellite gaming, guys. And we were people that love Jesus that were invited to not only serve in our schools, but to be on contract. So the same, this is the public funding satellite gaming now. And it eventually got to a point where our events were becoming so big, and the funding that we were getting was beyond what our church thought made sense under the umbrella of our church. So we ended up creating satellite gaming as a nonprofit organization. I was still the youth pastor at Lake Point Community Church, but eventually we started praying about what it looked like for me to transition full-time into satellite gaming. Eventually got enough funding to do that. And I still go to Lake Point Community Church. I'm still one of the worship leaders. I got to play drums last week. Super fun. And I'm still engaged with them through like some young adults ministries that we're working on. But that said, I transitioned 100% into doing gaming ministry. And it wasn't because I went into ministry thinking like, I'm just going to do video games. It was because, God, I have this desire. I love video games. I love youth, and I love you. And he allowed me to use all three of those things to start something like satellite gaming. And I've been doing it full time now for a year and a half. been doing satellite gaming ministry for about 4 years, and I love every minute of it. It's hard. It's a lot of work. You got to explain yourself a lot because it is weird. It is weird. Like I have weird, like look at that little dude on my shelf. Like I do weird. It's Kirby with legs, right? Like we do weird things in gaming ministry. So I get it. I get that it's weird. I've got a lot of explaining to do, but man, I love it. It's so fun.
I wonder if there are terms that we can begin to adopt about that whole explaining idea. But I guess where I'd like to go now is we're talking about, like, one of the things that I love about how I've gotten to know you is the fundamental idea that the gospel has never changed.
Man, yeah.
That there is still an approach to the idea of raising up disciples of Jesus Christ. Like that is the focus of youth ministry.
Yeah.
But I guess for me, as a parent of, I've got 4 grown kids now, and I'm not on the front lines anymore. I want to be to a degree, but
right.
All of the conversations that I have had are, you're 49 years old. Why do you want to be a youth pastor? I'm like, I don't know. I just like kids. Yeah. And honestly,
and adults don't like me. Just kidding. That's what I tell my wife. They can't. I got too much energy for adults. What do you mean?
Sometimes it's absolutely true. Like, or I'm having conversations with adults about youth culture, and they're like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, okay. So
okay, that's cool.
Yeah, I'm just gonna just sit here and be quiet.
Yeah.
But I guess, like, you know, if we know that there's a core foundation of the gospel that is unchanging, and we can agree upon that, we have agreed upon that.
Yeah.
What about the space that our young people are inhabiting? Like, you know, in the same way, you know, your heart broken as a young teen for your friends, but you were as equally concerned about them consuming you and your faith heritage that you grew up with in Christian school and going to church and your parents' ministry. Like, you were concerned that they were going to draw you too deeply in to them.
Yeah.
And I guess for me, when I think about where youth ministry has been transitioning, we're a year into this now, where like February, March, a year ago, COVID all of a sudden becomes, now what?
Yeah, where gaming ministry wasn't an option anymore. It was kind of one of the only options, right?
I honestly, in probably the last 8 years, I have played video games secretly in my own space, and I haven't really let anybody know that I play video games in the Christian community. There's a few people, but for the most part, now I'll tell everybody that I'm playing video games, and because of my place in the game, I have people coming to me and saying, "Hey, can you help me?"
Yeah.
And I'm like, absolutely. Let's set something up and let's chat.
Love it.
And so I wonder how do we help youth pastors today? I mean, many of them probably already have some kind of a language, but they may not even realize that there's people like you and I out there.
Yeah.
Right? That they think they're the weirdos in the room, when the weirdos in the room are the ones that are not playing video games anymore.
Right.
Like, you and I are part of an international esports call that happens once a month now on Friday mornings, and we're representing 260 countries of Christians. Awesome. It is amazing. Like, the guy did you hear the guy in Brazil that ran the FIFA soccer tournament on Twitch?
No, that's cool though.
And during the halftime ended up leading 100 kids to Jesus.
Let's go. That's sick. No, I didn't hear about that.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Like, and his biggest concern in trying to explain it to us is that he doesn't speak English as his primary language. I'm like, I don't care that you don't speak English.
Dude, yeah.
You brought the gospel in a way that I'm like, no one's really thinking about like this right now.
Right.
And I guess the idea of knowing that the gospel hasn't changed.
Mm-hmm.
But how do we then take the gospel in a new way to a new place?
Yeah, actually, what I like about this is something that is, we've talked about a lot of things, and we've talked about this, but not specifically this, right? So this is something that I think of often. I think about Jesus when he called the disciples, and when he's hanging out with Peter and John, and he's hanging out with Sons of Thunder, like he's walking around talking about things like parables about money. Why is he talking about money? Well, one, a lot of people connect with money because we all have to deal with it, right? But he has a tax collector as one of his disciples. A lot of times they're fishing. Why are they fishing? Was Jesus really into fishing? No, but his disciples were. Like they're talking about basically, I mean, they're always in fishing boats. Why are they always in fishing boats? Because that was kind of the world of his disciples. I don't think, do I think Jesus was a fisherman? Well, I think he used analogies like becoming fishers of men because his disciples understood that and they related to that. I can't tell you what ministry Jesus would be involved in if he were here. Would it be young adults ministry? Would it be a young moms ministry? Would it be a teen ministry? Would it be, would it be a ministry that fights, that stands up against murder? Would it be a ministry that stands up against this topic or that topic? I don't know. There's so many ministries out there. I don't know which one, but I do know this. I do know that Jesus called a bunch of fishermen to be his disciples. And I know because of that, he used analogies that fishermen understood. He went fishing. He got in boats. He walked on water because water was what they understood. Like, he calmed storms because literal storms on the sea, because that was the world in which they lived. So calming a storm of the sea meant more to a fisherman than it would mean if they were, if they were an agriculturist, maybe there would have been an earthquake and he saved them from an earthquake. I don't know. What I'm saying is, I wonder sometimes if Jesus called a bunch of gamers to be his disciples, what kind of analogies would he use? What kind of ways would he talk to them? He may not use fishers of men because we'd all be like, "You're gonna fish for people? That's weird." But he may say, like, who's on your friends list? Like, who's in your squad today? Who's in your party today? He might instead of calling them his followers, he might have called them his squad. He might have said like, "Hey, I'm going to the garden with my trio," right? Like, I'm not like, what I mean? Like, really, would he have used gamer? It's hard for me to say, like, when we ask ourselves, what would Jesus do? I don't think we actually know what Jesus would do a lot of times. Yeah. But I do think that he chose to speak in a way that his followers understood. And I think that if part of our mission as leaders in ministry is to go and make disciples, we need to treat our disciples the same way Jesus treated his disciples, right? They're not our disciples, really. They're God's disciples. But if we are to make disciples, we need to do the same thing. So if they have an interest, we should be engaged with their interest. Jesus was engaged with. Do you think Jesus cared about fishing? I mean, probably not any more than he cared about carpentry. Do we see Jesus? Like, Jesus knew carpentry, but how many analogies did he make about being a carpenter? I don't know, maybe one. I can't think of any. But when it comes to fishing and water and boats, we know a lot.
Yeah.
He didn't grow up a fisherman, but his disciples did. He walked away from what he knew, what he was comfortable with, to better relate to what his disciples knew and what his disciples were comfortable with. And a lot of the people watching this may not have grown up around video games.
Yeah.
They may have grown up around cars. They might want to work on cars. Jesus grew up around carpentry, but he entered into the world of fishing. I'm saying it might be time for us to figure out that a lot of this generation is into video games. Maybe it's time we start using video game analogies. Maybe it's time we start understanding it, and I think that to answer the question then, or to really respond, to go to this topic at hand, the gospel hasn't changed. No, it hasn't. It hasn't changed. But the activities in which our disciples are engaging, or which the disciples of Christ are engaging, are very different. So I think the analogies, there's room for, I'm not saying the analogies have to change, but there's room for the analogies to change. There's room for the context to change. And I think that we would benefit, and I think that disciples of Jesus would benefit greatly from us being willing to do that.
I think that really sums up like the whole reason why we're doing this video, like the whole reason why we're trying to build a conversation around this. But I think we would be amiss if we didn't talk about some of the dangers that are present and the concerns that we actually have. Like I don't know that. And there's the amazing thing is this thought, literally brand new in my head, is I don't know that there are bad people that I've met. I think that there are people that are behaving in a way that's counter to their, I don't know. I don't know if I want to say it's counter to their identity. But I wonder if maybe
it's counter to what they were created to be, right? Like we were created to be representatives of God, like to after his image. So if we're engaged in behavior that doesn't follow the character of God, in a sense, we are living contrary to what we were intended to be, right? I guess that's what sin is, missing the mark, right? We're missing something, right?
Yeah. And I think that not being afraid to not have the answers too.
Say that again. Not being afraid to
not have the answer.
Yeah.
We're having this discussion and the subsequent Q&A afterwards. We're looking to not necessarily answer. We need to find a bunch of questions, right?
Yeah. Amen. Yeah.
It was funny. In one of the communities I'm a part of, they were doing this event, and it was modernizing Sunday school.
Okay.
And
sounds terrifying.
Yeah, it does. So it was modernizing Sunday school, but there's still only one answer to every question.
Okay.
And it just took me right back to the Sunday school joke where the teacher is doing this huge explanation and this kid just keeps yelling out, Jesus, 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 Jesus.
Yeah.
Jesus is the answer. And the Sunday school teacher is like, Billy, seriously, it's squirrel. Like that's the answer, Jesus. But I think we've gotten to this place where the church is no longer the big fish in the small pond.
Okay.
Like we are here present in this place in time and history, and everything is elevated bigger than the church. Ideas, opinions. You're in the US, so right versus left. In Canada, we have very similar kind of ideologies, but I think that we're not really battling. I think we've drawn the wrong battle lines. Like I had a leader in a church, the last church that I worked at, who accused me of only playing video games with kids. And I said, really? The only time that I play video games with kids is at your events. Like in my time, I don't play video games with kids.
Yeah.
But it was like they had to actually rewrite my contract. I was not allowed to digitally connect with kids. I was only allowed to connect in real time, face-to-face meetings. And we can't do that anymore.
Yeah. Here's what I'll say. I respect that they're looking out for, like, if it's a safety approach, right? Like, hey, we need to be safe about this.
Absolutely.
So have some guidelines, keep it safe, keep it right.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. But if we are saying we're not going to that space, then I'm just going to ask you this. If the youth workers aren't going to that space, who is going to that space?
Yeah.
Who is? If it's not, I'm going to tell you, like, it's either me or some other random 40-year-old, and good luck figuring out what they're going to say. Like, well, kids shouldn't play games online. Well, if you're going to go that far, like, well, too bad, because they are, like, right. Yeah. They are there. That's literally where most of our kids are. So, I also understand that not everyone understands why we are going to that world, right?
Yeah.
But I think what we're here to say, Brett, and what you're here to say, and what I'm here to back you up in saying is, oh man, holy cow. I get that it's confusing. I get that not everything about video games is innately healthy. I get that. There's a lot of things we do in our society, and I think we'll get to that in a little bit, that is not innately healthy, right? But what I will say is, if we aren't in that space, who's going to be showing those students and giving them a filter for what is healthy and what is not healthy, and what is okay in that space and what is not okay in that space? You know, when a student learns how to drive, they have to have, like in America, I don't know how it is in Canada. I'm actually curious, but in America, when you learn how to drive, in the US, when you learn how to drive, you have your permit, and you've got to drive with someone else who knows how to drive for a while. Now the student knows how to drive, but why is the other person there while they have a permit? So they can say like, hey, remember, red light means stop. You can turn right on red, but you can't turn left on red unless you're on a one-way street going on to there's a lot of random rules, and we've got to help them navigate what they can and can't do. They know how to drive. They know how to push the gas. But if I wasn't there in the car with them while they have their permit, they'd be like a fish out of water. So the idea is it's almost like they're in that space. Like these kids are going to drive. Yeah. But they need an adult with them to help them navigate through it. And I'm fearful if we're pulling youth workers out of that space, I'm fearful for who is influencing students while they're in that space.
Yeah. No, I think you're absolutely right. Is, you know, making sure that we find those means, like how really is one of those questions. And maybe even before the how, like why?
Right.
Why would we go and be a part of esports or video games or the digital platform, or even, I mean, I think we've become accustomed. Social media is kind of the norm now, right? You know, kids are not expecting a phone call from us anymore. But there is some kind of connection that's being made. So we've adopted social medias into our ministry. It probably took a little bit longer than some, but not as long as other ideals. Yeah. Right. And so I guess, you know, what is it like? How, like, I'm trying to figure the right question. Like when we're thinking about going to where they are.
Yeah. Well, I think I have and I've shared a little bit of this with you, but I have a great story I like to share that I think points to kind of maybe the philosophy or the mentality of like, okay, maybe you get that you need to go where kids are, right? But like, okay, why video games? Like, why do I need to jump in that space? And I think I have a kind of an analogy / story. If this is a good time for it, I'd love to share it. Yeah. Okay.
Lean in.
So I'll just start from the beginning of this story. And it started actually way back in 1929. I was there. No, I was not there.
Some youth assume that we were.
Yeah, some youth assume we were. We were not. So it was 1929. I was in the States. It was in Northeast Philadelphia. There's just, you know, it was when manufacturing and factories were getting built, and they were really big, and some buildings were built structurally sound, some were not, some had problems, some didn't. But there was one particular factory in Northeast Philadelphia that was awesome. The manufacturing was going great. All the numbers were like in the black, like meaning they were positive in every single part. Their sales were up, their marketing was up, their staff was up, like everything looked good. But in one section, this factory the owner of the factory was looking through their numbers, and they had one number that was in the red. And he's like, what is it? What's in the red? What's going on? And he realized that it was in the category of building maintenance. So he gets to this building maintenance team and he says, what's going on? Are we like, our bathrooms like getting destroyed? Is it vandalism? What's happening? And they're like, well, yeah, sir, we're having to replace like 100 windows in like our first like month or two of manufacturing. He's like, 100 windows? How are they breaking? Is it something in the air? Are the windows poorly manufactured? Like, who do we got to talk to? Where are we ordering these windows from? They're like, no, sir. They're actually kids on the street throwing rocks at our windows. And he's like, you got to be kidding me. So he looks out his window in his little corner office at the top floor, and he sees, sure enough, there's kids. What they're doing is they're playing football. And in between plays, they're throwing rocks and bricks at the buildings. So he's like, oh my goodness, this is ridiculous. Calls up his buddy, Joseph J. Tomlin. It was a stockbroker in New York. And you know that timing, stock market's doing pretty well, but it's about to crash, right? It's about to crash big time. So he says, Joseph, I know you're in the stock market, but next time you're back in town, this is his hometown. He said, can you swing by my office and see what we're dealing with? And he says, yeah. So he's a youth worker. So he gets, like a lot of you that are watching would get, the first thing you got to go down to their space, right? You got to go to their territory. We as youth workers know that, but a lot of times we got to tell people, first thing, dude, get out from the building, go to where they are. That's step one. We get that. We're youth workers. We go to football games. We go to their schools. We get it. They go down there and he says, all right, we got to figure out now why they're throwing the rocks at the building. This is the why, right? Why are they doing this? What's going on? And they figure out these kids are just bored. These kids, maybe they don't connect well at home. They need something to do in between plays. They don't all get a play. So in between plays or while they're on the sidelines, they just like, how many windows can we break today? I don't know. Let's start throwing rocks and bricks. So they throw rocks and bricks at the building. So I'll try to kind of make this part quick and just say they decided that this factory was going to sponsor the first youth football team in their community. And they decide to get a hold of other factories, and they decided to get a hold of parents. And eventually, as the parents hear about it, they're like, I don't know how I feel about that. You want my kids to run at each other full speed with a pigskin leather ball, tackle each other to the ground, and hurt each other. So Joseph J. Tallman says, well, ma'am, they're already doing it. They're doing it on gravel right now. And while they're playing football, they're also throwing rocks at our building. So you can either sign your kid up for football and we'll pay for the football pads. We'll create safety around it. I think your kids will actually get hurt less, or we'll just take you to court and you can pay for our windows. And the parents are like, okay, where do I sign? Now that's a little bit of a dramatization of the story, but the point is he's showing, like Joseph J. Tallman was showing these families, look, I get that not everything about football is innately healthy, but kids are already doing it. And if we don't add football pads, we don't bring football pads, we don't bring some sort of positivity into this, it's going to stay bad. It's going to stay toxic. They're going to keep breaking buildings. They're not going to have mentors. So we'll give them coaches, mentors. They'll build relationship with their peers. It'll be great. A bunch of factories, a bunch of teams get built. And a number of years later, after the stock market crashes, this is Joseph J. Tallman's full-time job. They called it something like the Northeast Football Conference. I can't remember exactly. But what happens is they decide that they're going to have like this giant, it'd be like when we decide like we want to have a giant youth event, right? You know, get 400 or 500 kids there, and they have a whole bunch of different speakers talking about different topics, but it's all around the idea of football. They bring in coaches and athletes and trainers and people that, you know, manufacture football pads that can say like, and I'm sure they had all sorts of things. I don't know all the workshops exactly, but it was anything from building camaraderie with your football, with your teammates, all the way to like proper tackling technique, how to not hurt your neck, how to wear your pads properly. It was like an entire like day-long event where they were taught all these ways to take care of themselves and find good in football, a sport that is at its nature not very safe, right? It's physically damaging. So what happens is they go to have this conference, they go to have this big old convention, and there's this giant storm. And we've all done youth work. Like we know that sometimes you'll have leaders that are looking for any reason to bail. Like it's snowing. I live in a state where like if it snows half an inch, we shut down an entire town, right? But students, they'll show up for anything, right? They'll show up. So
they do.
These hundreds of students are showing up, but all of the workshop hosts start dropping off one by one by one. And it turns out that almost all the kids show up, but only one of the workshop hosts shows up. And the board of directors at this organization is like, what do we do? And Joseph J. Tallman says, hey bro, this one workshop host, can you run like all the workshops? Can you do it? Can you like entertain all these hundreds of kids all day? Cause you're kind of the only one we have. So he says, all right, I'll give it a shot. So what he does is this entire now conference is put on by this one guy, teaches them about tackling technique, tells them, hey, look around you. These brothers are going to be people that you grow up with, people that someday you're going to be complaining to your kids about. Someday you're going to be complaining to your wife about. Teaches about relationship. They talk this much about really football and this much about all of the community and the safety that we need to pursue while we're playing the sport and the physical health we need to pursue and the mental health we need to pursue. At the end of the conference, the end of the convention, the board of directors is just like jaw drop. They're like in tears basically. And they go to this one director and they tell him like, that was amazing. How'd you do that? And he's like, I don't know. Just this topic's important to me. I want to see kids find safe ways to be engaged with this sport. So Joseph J. Tallman talks with his directors and he says, hey, before you leave, sir, I want to tell you something. We want you to know that what you did impacted our organization so much that we're no longer going to be called the Northeast Football Conference. But he said, Mr. Pop Warner, I'd like to name our organization after you. Now, those of you that know the name Pop Warner, you're going to go like, oh my gosh, that's the story of Pop Warner. Those of you that don't, you'll be like, I don't get it. Let me tell you this. Pop Warner is one of the largest, longest lasting, and most successful youth sports organizations in the world. Like it is a phenomenal organization that builds positive community around sports. And here's how I'll summarize it. I'll say this. When Joseph J. Tallman and Pop Warner started this organization, they didn't go to football saying like, Football is innately healthy. Everything about football is good. Let's do this. What they said was, kids really like running into each other full speed. They're going to hurt each other. I don't really like that they're doing it. The parents didn't like they're doing it, but somebody's got to come around them, show them love, build positivity, and put some football pads on them. Here's what I'm challenging all the youth workers with. And I think here's what people like Bret are really trying to communicate. There's a big time need for students in the gaming world to be taught what it means to take care of themselves mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. Not everything about video games is innately healthy when it comes to your spiritual health, your mental health, even your physical health. Like, I've already been staring at a screen. I need a break. I need to get up, stretch my back. I need to walk, right? But here's the thing. I'll put it in simple terms. We are inviting people to join us in metaphorically putting football pads on video game culture. If we do not do that, kids will continue to be hurt spiritually, emotionally, and mentally. They will. We need to create programs that build community. We need to create Bible studies that teach them about the gospel. We need to create, honestly, a program that is accepted by all communities and models that are accepted by all communities so that we can build relationships about mental health and then eventually have an opportunity to share the gospel with them. We need to create safe spaces around video games, and we need to have a place where students can come and experience positivity around these things. So much like Pop Warner put football pads on football, we invite you to put football pads on video games. That, to me, that's the why.
Yeah. I think that really captures so succinctly the heart of this community of leaders that I've just found myself embedded with.
They sound great. I want to meet them someday.
Oh, come on. You're already there. But drawing in others, right? Like, this video is to many youth workers, leaders, and volunteers and paid that are not doing this.
Yeah.
And it's not even an issue. Like, we're not here giving kids permission to play video games. That's not what it's about.
Yeah.
The idea
that's the parents' job.
That's the parents' job. Which there's a completely separate video about that coming out in a couple of weeks as well.
I love that.
So that's going to be exciting. But I think that in the midst of it, and you nailed it on the head, these kids are already doing it. They're already inhabiting that space. And that space is already influencing them. I'm gonna drop this. I haven't shared this with you yet.
Oh.
But I was talking with a friend of mine. He's an author out of Philadelphia to align our stories, which is pretty interesting. And I was like, come on, give me one thing. It's in your new book that's coming out just soon. And the title of the book is called Aliens Among Us.
Okay.
And I said, what's the big, like, home run quote? And he says, give me a few minutes. And he comes back and he says this. He says, 65% of students entering grade 1 in 2021, by the time they graduate college, the jobs that they will inhabit don't even exist yet.
That's so bonkers.
65% of kids are going to do a job that doesn't even exist yet.
I mean, looking back, I'm one of those 65, right? Like,
absolutely. We both are. And I think that this trend continues. So knowing that there are things that we are not even know that's going to exist, God does.
Yeah, amen.
And that he has called us to help fortify this generation to be positioned to be the seeds of faith for the people that are around them, to take on that challenge of having enough compassion that they're willing to be in a dark space, knowing that they are the light.
Yeah, that's good.
And just wrap it up right there. I think that's...
Oh, man. I love it. Thanks for having me do this, dude. This is really fun.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. I hope someone gets something out of it. I did. So I think it's a win.
It is. It absolutely is. Yeah. It's a win. It's a win because you and I had an opportunity to just talk about the things we love. And I mean, I think similar to what Pop Warner did by starting maybe we could do a one-day event that was we brought in several of the friends that we've already connected with, and we could do like a course on toxicity.
So actually, I was going to ask you, we do this thing called Nerd Camp. We did it once and we're doing it again.
Okay.
It's just that. And we just talked about it at our board meeting on Sunday. And I would love to have you, we have different speakers talk about different categories. As of right now, it's all volunteer. But we're looking for funding. Hopefully we want to give some thank yous, but we have artists, we have game developers come in, talk about job opportunities. We have a speaker that talks about, like our last one was more of a church camp format. The way we're doing it this year is a community format, but the small group leaders will be, the primary small group leaders are going to be followers of Christ. Their hope is to build relationships with these kids and then eventually invite them to a traditional church camp. Because a lot of these kids wouldn't go to a camp, but if they build relationship with a small group leader at Nerd Camp, that then gives them a personal invite to camp, they might be more likely to go. So that said, one of the things we like to do is offer a workshop on like coaching or mental health, or talk to you about, hey, what type of a workshop would you like to lead? So we already have some of the workshop posts lined up, but I'd love for you to be one of those. I think it'd be super rad.
That'd be amazing. Yeah. I'd love that opportunity just to come back and to share some of my story too. Look forward to connecting with you further. And I just want a huge thank you from all of us up here in Canada. Thank you for being submitted to the journey that God has had you on, and just the amazing things that God is doing in and through you, just touching the lives of people everywhere.
Oh, thanks, Brett. Appreciate it, man.
Thanks, man. Have a great day.
You too.
I hope that you are genuinely encouraged by the story that Jamie had to share to each of us tonight. I have gotten to know him, as I said at the beginning, over the last 8 or 9 months, and just watching the fervor that he has for doing things via Twitch and Discord, and all of the dynamics in and around gaming are absolutely amazing. And we look forward to sending out some details so you can kind of follow Satellite Gaming and what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. It's really something fascinating and to watch, and to have an opportunity to dial into a relationship with Jamie. He'd love to hear from any one of you, as he's already said to us. So let's close in prayer. Lord, you have hopefully just pulled back the curtain a little bit as to where we're at, what's happening, and the dynamics that we're in the midst of. Heavenly Father, we just invite your presence into this space right now, between us, the keyboard, and our monitors, Lord God. That you would translate this moment, this hour, into an opportunity to just ask some of the harder questions, ask some of the things that we might be afraid to ask. How are things changing, Lord? Give us the courage and the strength to come alongside parents, to come alongside our youth, to come alongside our ministries, and just watch you move through this digital space. Again, Lord, we thank you and we praise you in Jesus' precious name. Thank you so much for watching. We're going to be doing a live Q&A, which in order for that to work in a live context, I need questions from you guys. Anything you can think of when it comes to the digital ministry, which would include any of the social media platforms, how they work, what are the purposes of them, and then specifically, my specialty is going to be working in esports, and that's using video games and the competitive side in order to build relationships with youth through the high schools, through our communities, and just have an opportunity to be in the midst of teens. Look forward to hearing from all of you. Have an amazing night. Bye.
Thank you, Brett and Jamie, for your insights and for your encouragement as our churches continue to better understand and prayerfully discern what does it mean to minister and step into the esports arena. And on Tuesday, April 27th, we're looking forward to having Brett back as he is answering your questions in a live Q&A. And so you'll see instructions on our website, and you'll see that link in the description below. But also, this is a webinar that you need to register for. So again, the link is in the description below. We would love to see you online that day. And so blessings to you as you continue to venture and to understand where Jesus is leading you in the area of esports ministries.